The prairie woke slowly that morning, as if the land itself had learned not to rush hope. A pale gold light stretched across the horizon, touching the tops of the tall grass, each blade bending softly beneath a wandering wind, like quiet souls bowing to something unseen. Far along the narrow trail, a stagecoach moved through dust and distance, its wooden frame creaking like an old memory, carrying with it a handful of lives and one fragile promise. Inside, near the window, smudged by miles, sat a young woman with her hands folded too tightly in her lap. Her name was Eliza May. She held a letter, creased at the edges from being opened too many times. Read too carefully, believed too cautiously. The ink had begun to fade, but the words still lingered. A home, a partnership, a future. She traced a single line with her finger, not smiling, not quite allowing herself that softness. Hope had never been something she trusted easily. It was a thing that arrived dressed as kindness, and often left wearing disappointment. Still, she had come, because sometimes, even the most careful hearts grow tired of standing alone. The coach rolled into town just as the sun lifted itself fully into the sky, revealing a place worn by time and quiet struggle. Wooden buildings leaned into each other like old friends. The streets carried dust instead of laughter, and the air held that familiar stillness of lives half-lived. Eliza stepped down slowly, her boots meeting the earth with a softness that did not belong to this place. She looked around, not searching for beauty, only for recognition. For him, Caleb Turner. The name had once felt like a doorway. Now it felt like a question. She spotted him near the edge of the street, standing beside a hitching post, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she gathered herself, like someone picking up the scattered pieces of courage, and walked toward him. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she reached him, she offered a small nod, her voice quiet but steady. Eliza May. The words hung between them, gentle and uncertain. Caleb looked at her, not with cruelty, but with something far more hollow. Disappointment. It settled into his features without resistance. He let out a breath, not sharp enough to wound, but not kind enough to comfort. "You're not what I expected." The sentence drifted into the space between them and stayed there. Eliza did not flinch, but something inside her shifted, like a door closing without sound. She had imagined this moment many times, but never like this. Never so quiet, never so empty. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes already searching elsewhere, as if the conversation had ended before it truly began. "I think there's been a mistake." His voice carried no anger, only avoidance. "I'm not looking for this." He didn't explain what this meant. He didn't need to. Eliza understood. She had spent most of her life understanding things that were never spoken aloud. She nodded once, emotion so small it almost disappeared. Of course. That was all she said. No pleading, no questioning, just acceptance, the kind that comes from long practice. Caleb gave a brief half-smile, not unkind, but distant. Then he turned and walked away, just like that. No final glance, no hesitation, as if she had never been more than a letter. Easily folded, easily forgotten. The street returned to its quiet rhythm, boots against dirt, wagon wheels turning slowly. But for Eliza, everything had stilled. She stood there for a moment, hands resting at her sides, the letter still tucked carefully in her pocket. It no longer felt like hope. It felt like proof that even written promises could carry emptiness. She moved eventually, not because she knew where to go, but because standing still felt too much like being seen. The post office sat at the corner, a modest building with peeling paint and a tired door. She walked toward it, drawn by instinct more than purpose. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and time. A man behind the counter glanced at her briefly, then returned to his work. She did not speak. What would she say? That she had come across miles of land, carrying belief in something fragile, only to find it dissolve before her eyes. No, some things were better left unspoken. She stepped back outside, the sun now higher, less gentle. There was a bench beside the building, weathered and uneven. She sat, slowly, carefully, as if even the act of resting required permission. Her hands rested in her lap once more, but they no longer held the same quiet strength. They felt empty. Time passed, though she could not have said how much. The world continued around her, unchanged, unbothered. A horse trotted past. A child laughed somewhere in the distance. A door creaked open and shut. Life did not pause for broken expectations. Eliza lowered her gaze, watching a small line of ants carry something far too large for them. They did not question the weight. They simply continued. A strange thought settled into her. Perhaps survival was not about strength. Perhaps it was about continuing. Even when the reason had quietly disappeared, the sun began its slow descent, casting longer shadows across the street. And still, she sat, not waiting, not hoping, just existing in the space left behind. It was then, in that quiet unraveling, that she felt it. Not a voice, not a sound, but a presence. Steady, unhurried. She looked up. Across the street, near the edge of a worn fence, stood a man. He had been there long enough to feel familiar, and yet she was certain she had not noticed him before. He wore no expression of curiosity, no trace of judgment, only stillness, like the land itself. His hat cast a shadow across his face, but his eyes remained clear, observing, not intruding. There was something about him, something difficult to name. He did not step forward immediately, did not call out. He simply waited, as if giving her the space to decide whether she wished to be seen. And somehow, that made all the difference. After a moment, he crossed the street, each step measured, quiet. When he reached her, he did not stand too close, did not ask questions, just spoke in a voice low and steady. "You look like you could use a place to rest." The words carried no assumption, no hidden meaning, only kindness. Eliza studied him briefly, searching for something familiar, something that might warn her to turn away. But there was nothing, only calm. "I don't have anything to offer in return," she said softly. It was not refusal, just truth. The man nodded once, as if he had expected that answer. Didn't ask for anything. A simple reply, but it settled differently, like a door left open, without pressure to walk through. She hesitated, not out of fear, but from habit. Trust had never come easily. Still, there was something in his presence, something steady enough to lean against, even if only for a moment. She stood slowly. The movement felt uncertain, but not impossible. He stepped back slightly, allowing her space. "There's a barn just outside town," he said. "Dry, quiet. You can stay the night. No more, no less." Eliza nodded. "Thank you." The words felt small, but they were real. They walked together, not side by side, but not distant either. The space between them held a quiet understanding. No need for conversation. The sky began to deepen into shades of amber and soft blue, the day folding itself gently into evening. When they reached the barn, he pushed the door open. Inside, the scent of hay and wood filled the air. Simple, but safe. He set down a lantern, its light flickering softly against the walls. "You'll be all right here," he said. She nodded again. And then, he turned to leave. No lingering, no expectation, just quiet departure. Eliza watched him go, a strange feeling settling in her chest. Not relief, not yet, but something close. She stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking beneath her weight. A small space, but enough. She lowered herself onto a bed of hay, leaning back slowly. Above her, through a narrow gap in the wood, the night sky revealed itself, wide, endless, unaffected by the small tragedies of human hearts. She exhaled, a breath she had been holding for longer than she realized. Outside, she could hear faint movement, a rhythmic sound. She shifted slightly, peering through the gap. There he was, the man, working quietly by the fence, mending something broken, with steady hands, not rushing, not stopping, just continuing, as if that was all life required. Eliza watched for a moment, then rested her head back. Two strangers, under the same sky, carrying different kinds of brokenness, unaware that something had already begun. Not love, not yet, just the softest thread of connection, the kind that does not demand to be seen, only felt. And in that quiet, as the stars settled into place, Eliza May, for the first time since arriving, did not feel entirely alone. Morning did not arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly, like a memory returning in pieces. A pale light slipped through the cracks in the barn walls, resting gently against the hay, touching Eliza's face with a softness she had almost forgotten. For a moment, she did not move. She simply lay there, listening to the quiet rhythm of the world waking. A distant horse shifting its weight, the low creak of wood settling, the wind brushing past like a familiar hand. There was no urgency in the air, no demand, only stillness. She opened her eyes slowly, as if unsure whether the night had truly passed. But it had, and she was still here. The realization did not bring relief, but it did not bring sorrow either, just a quiet acknowledgement. She sat up carefully, brushing strands of hay from her dress. The barn looked different in the daylight, less like a place of shelter, more like a place of beginning. She stepped outside. The morning stretched wide before her, open land painted in soft gold and pale blue. And there he was, the man from the night before, standing near the fence, his back turned, working in the same steady rhythm, as if time had not interrupted him. He did not notice her at first, or perhaps he did, and simply chose not to break the silence. Eliza watched for a moment. There was something grounding in the way he moved, each action deliberate, unhurried, nothing wasted, nothing forced. Eventually, he turned. Their eyes met briefly. He gave a small nod. Morning. The word carried no expectation of reply. Still, she answered. Morning. Her voice was quiet, but clearer than it had been the day before. He gestured slightly toward a bucket near the well. Water's fresh, and that was all. No questions about her past, no curiosity about her plans, just the offering of something simple, something useful. Eliza walked toward the well, her steps more certain than before. She washed her hands, her face, letting the cool water ground her in the present. When she turned back, he was already moving toward the barn. There's bread inside, he said. You could take what you need. No insistence, no watchful eyes, just trust. It felt unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. Inside the barn, she found a small loaf wrapped in cloth, still warm. She paused, not because she doubted it, but because she was not used to taking without permission. Still, she broke a piece, held it carefully, and ate. The taste was simple, but it settled something inside her, something deeper than hunger. Outside, the day continued to unfold. Eliza found herself lingering, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because leaving did not feel necessary. She watched as the man worked, fixing fences, checking the horses, moving through the land as if he belonged to it, or perhaps as if it belonged to him in a quieter way. Eventually, she stepped closer, not too close, just enough to be seen. He glanced at her briefly. There's work if you want it, he said. No pressure, no assumption, just an open space. Eliza hesitated. Work had always meant obligation, expectation, but this felt different. What kind of work? She asked. He gestured toward a patch of land near the cabin. Garden's been left to itself. Could use tending. She followed his gaze. The soil looked dry, untouched, forgotten. Something in her stirred. A quiet recognition. I can do that, she said, and for the first time, there was something steady in her voice. He nodded once. That was enough. The garden became her place. At first, it resisted her. The soil stubborn, the roots tangled, but she did not rush. She worked slowly, patiently, as if understanding that healing, whether of land or heart, could not be forced. Days began to pass, not marked by hours, but by small changes. The way the soil softened beneath her hands, the way the wind felt less distant, the way silence no longer felt empty. They spoke little. Eliza and the man, whose name she would come to learn, was Jonah Hale. It came not through introduction, but through a passing voice. A boy, no older than 10, running toward the fence with a wide grin. "Mr. Hale," he called. "Look what I found." Jonah turned, a faint hint of something softer crossing his face. Tommy Reed, full of restless energy and endless curiosity, held up a small carved piece of wood. Eliza watched from a distance, the way Jonah crouched slightly to meet the boy at his level, the way his voice shifted, just enough to carry warmth. Not loud, not obvious, but there. "You made that?" Jonah asked. The boy nodded proudly. Jonah studied it carefully, as though it were something valuable, then handed it back. "Keep at it." His words were simple, but they stayed. Tommy ran off again, his laughter trailing behind him. Eliza returned to her work, but something had changed. Not in Jonah. He remained the same, steady, quiet, but in the way she saw him, there was more there, more than silence, more than distance. That afternoon, a woman arrived. Her presence carried a different kind of stillness. Older, watchful, Mrs. Adler. She greeted Jonah with familiarity, then turned her gaze toward Eliza. Not unkind, but knowing. "You knew," she said. Eliza nodded. Mrs. Adler studied her for a moment longer, then gave a small smile. "Stay as long as you need." The words felt like something more than permission. They felt like understanding. Days turned into something softer. Mornings began with quiet routine. Water from the well, bread left without mention, work shared without expectation. Eliza found rhythm in the garden, in the silence, in the presence of someone who did not demand explanation. Jonah never asked about her past, never questioned her staying, and somehow that made it easier to remain. At night, the barn became less of a shelter, more of a place she chose. The sky above still vast, still endless, but no longer distant. There were moments, small, easily missed, that began to settle between them. A second piece of bread left beside the first. A tool repaired before she noticed it was broken. A quiet pause when their paths crossed. Nothing spoken, yet everything understood. One evening, the sky shifted suddenly, dark clouds gathering with a quiet urgency. The wind changed, carrying something heavier. Eliza felt it before she saw it. The tension, the memory. Storms had never been just storms. They carried echoes of instability, of nights without shelter, of moments where safety disappeared without warning. Her hands stilled in the soil, her breath shallow. The first roll of thunder broke across the sky. Soft, but enough. She stepped back. The world around her seemed to tilt, not visibly, but within. Jonah appeared beside her, not suddenly, just there, like he had always been. "Storm's coming," he said, his voice calm, unchanged. Eliza nodded, but her hands trembled. He noticed. Of course he did. Still, he said nothing. He simply moved toward the barn, gesturing for her to follow. Inside, the air felt different, safer. The storm broke fully then, rain striking the roof in steady rhythm, thunder rolling through the sky. Eliza sat, her hands clasped tightly, her breath uneven. Jonah remained nearby, not too close, not distant, just present. He did not speak, did not offer empty reassurances. He simply stayed. Time passed. The storm continued, but something shifted. Slowly, her breathing steadied, her hands loosened. The fear did not disappear, but it softened, because she was not alone in it. When the storm finally eased, the silence that followed felt different. Not empty, but full. Eliza looked toward Jonah. He met her gaze briefly, then nodded once, as if to say, "You're all right." And for the first time, she believed it, not because he told her, but because he had stayed. That night, as she lay beneath the open sky, the stars seemed closer, not because they had moved, but because something within her had. She understood something then, quietly, gently. Healing was not loud. It did not arrive all at once. It came in moments, in small acts of kindness, in silence that did not wound, in presence that did not demand. And sometimes, it came in the form of a man who asked for nothing, yet gave everything that mattered. Eliza closed her eyes, the wind moving softly above, and for the first time in a long while, she did not brace herself for what might come. She simply rested, in the quiet, in the steady, in the beginning of something she did not yet have a name for, but trust enough to let grow. The land began to change before she noticed it in herself. Small things at first. The garden no longer resisted her hands. The soil softened easily. Green life pushing upward where once there had only been quiet neglect. Eliza worked each morning beneath a sky that felt wider now. Not because it had grown, but because she had. There was a rhythm to her days, one that asked nothing of her except presence. And she gave it, freely. Jonah moved through those same days with the same steady quiet, mending, checking, building, always building something, but never speaking of it. It was Mrs. Adler who shifted the stillness, not intentionally, not carelessly, but truth has a way of arriving even when no one calls for it. Eliza had been gathering water at the well. Her sleeves rolled slightly, her hands marked by soil and effort. Mrs. Adler stood nearby, watching the horizon in that way she often did, as though reading something written far beyond sight. "You've settled well," she said. Eliza glanced at her, offering a small nod. "I've had reason to." Mrs. Adler's lips curved faintly. "Yes, you have." A pause settled between them, not uncomfortable, but waiting. Then, almost as an afterthought, "You're on Hale land, you know." Eliza's hand stilled. She looked up. "I thought this belonged to someone in the next county." Mrs. Adler gave a quiet shake of her head. "No, all of this." Her gaze moved across the stretching fields. "The fences, the distant hills, belongs to him. Jonah Hale." The words did not land loudly. They did not need to. They settled slowly, like rain sinking into dry earth. Eliza did not respond immediately. Her mind did not race. It simply shifted, a quiet rearranging of something she had believed without question. He had never said, not once, and she had never asked, because it had not seemed important. But now, it felt like something else entirely. Not deception. No, Jonah did not feel like a man who hid things out of intent. But still, something within her stirred. That old, careful instinct. The one that remembered that sometimes what is not said matters as much as what is. That evening, she found him near the far fence, the sun lowering behind him, casting long shadows across the land. He worked as he always did, focused, steady, as though nothing in the world had shifted at all. Eliza approached slowly, not uncertain, but aware. There was a difference now, not in him, but in what she knew. He noticed her presence. Of course he did. He always did. Yet he did not stop working, did not interrupt the quiet. She stood a few steps away, watching, gathering the words she was not used to speaking. "This is your land," she said finally, not accusing, not soft, just true. Jonah's hands stilled for a moment. Only a moment. Then he straightened, turning to face her. Yes. The answer came simply, without hesitation, without weight. Eliza studied him. "You never said." He held her gaze. "Steady. You never asked." There was no defense in his voice. No apology either. Just truth. The kind that does not bend itself to expectation. She let the silence settle, testing it. It did not feel sharp, only unfamiliar. "Why?" she asked. Not why the land, but why the silence. Jonah's gaze drifted briefly across the horizon, as if the answer lived somewhere beyond them. Because it doesn't change anything that matters. His words were quiet, almost distant. Eliza felt something shift again, not outwardly, but deep within. For some people, things like that changed everything. Position, power, expectation. She had seen it before, felt it. But Jonah, he stood before her the same way he always had, unmoved by what the land meant, as though ownership was simply another task, not an identity. It mattered to others. He continued, but it never fixed anything. The words lingered, heavy in their softness. Eliza looked at him differently then, not because of what he had, but because of what he did not carry. Pride, expectation, distance. There was none of it. Just a man, standing in the fading light, holding pieces of a life he had built quietly. And yet, the old part of her, the careful part, still whispered, "Be sure, be certain, because once you believed in words that did not hold, and you learned the cost." She lowered her gaze briefly, then lifted it again. "You could have told me." Jonah nodded. "I could have." Another pause, but it wouldn't have made you stay. The truth of it settled between them, unavoidable. He had never tried to convince her of anything, never used what he had to shape her choices. He had simply allowed her to exist, free from influence, free from expectation. And suddenly, Eliza understood. That was the difference between something that is offered and something that is earned. The next words came quieter, more fragile. "You don't ask anything of me." Jonah's expression did not change. "No. Why?" The question slipped out before she could soften it. "Because you're not something to be asked for." The answer was simple, but it carried something deeper, something steady. You're here because you chose to be, or you're not. That's yours, not mine. Eliza felt the weight of that settle. Not heavy, but grounding. Choice. It had been so long since she had felt it clearly. Without pressure, without fear. Most of her life had been shaped by necessity, by survival, by accepting what was given. But this was different. This was space. The kind that allowed something real to grow. Not forced, not rushed, just given room. She turned slightly, her gaze moving across the land. The fields stretching wide, the fences standing firm, the quiet work of something built with time. And she saw it differently now, not as something owned, but as something cared for, just like he had cared for her presence, without claiming it. That night, the air felt softer, the stars above steady, unchanging. Eliza sat near the small fire outside the barn, the flames moving gently, casting quiet shadows. Jonah sat a short distance away, not close, but not distant either. The space between them familiar now, comfortable. She watched the fire for a long moment, then spoke, not looking at him. "I thought if I stayed somewhere long enough, I would eventually be asked to leave." Her voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something long carried. Jonah did not respond immediately. When he did, his voice was just as steady. People leave when something stops being useful to them. He paused, then added, "You're not here to be useful." The words settled into the night air. Soft, but certain. Eliza felt something loosen, a small knot she had carried without noticing. She looked up, her gaze meeting his briefly. And in that moment, something changed. Not loudly, not suddenly, but undeniably. It was not safety anymore. Not just that. It was something deeper. Something that did not ask her to prove her place. Something that did not measure her worth. Something that simply saw her, not as broken, not as abandoned, but as someone who had endured and remained. The fire crackled softly. The wind moved gently through the open land. And for the first time, Eliza did not question her staying. She did not weigh it against fear, did not measure it against past wounds. She simply chose, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had found somewhere that did not ask her to become anything other than what she already was. She exhaled slowly, a quiet release. Jonah did not speak, did not ask. He simply remained, as he always had. And that was enough, more than enough. The night deepened around them. The fire dimmed, but something within her had begun to burn steady. Not fragile like hope, not uncertain like expectation, but quiet, enduring, real. And though no words were spoken, no promises made, Eliza understood something she had never fully known before. That sometimes, the truest kind of love does not arrive with declarations. It arrives in the absence of fear, in the presence of choice, in the quiet understanding that you are free to leave, and still, you choose to stay. The days had begun to settle into something gentle. Not perfect, not untouched by memory, but steady. The kind of steady that does not ask to be noticed, only felt in the quiet spaces between moments. The garden had come alive, green leaves stretching toward the sun, small blossoms opening with quiet confidence. Eliza moved through it each morning. Her hands no longer hesitant. The soil no longer resisted her. And perhaps she no longer resisted herself. Jonah remained, as he always had, present, unmoving in the ways that mattered. Their lives did not change suddenly. They deepened, like roots beneath the surface, growing unseen, until one afternoon, the stillness shifted. It came not with warning, but with a presence that felt misplaced. A horse approached from the far road, its rhythm uneven against the quiet land. Eliza looked up from the garden, and before she could fully recognize the shape of it, she felt it, that old echo. The past does not always knock. Sometimes, it simply returns. Caleb Turner dismounted slowly, dust trailing behind him. He looked different, not in form, but in the way his eyes moved. Searching, calculating. He spotted her quickly. Of course he did. Some things are easy to find when you've decided they might now be valuable. Eliza stood, her hands still at her sides, her posture calm. Not the same girl who had stepped off the stagecoach. Not the same silence. Caleb walked closer, a half-smile touching his lips, as though time had softened what had passed. Eliza, her name, sounded unfamiliar in his voice. She did not step forward, did not step back. You left without saying much. He continued, his tone light, almost apologetic. I've been thinking. The words lingered, but they did not carry weight. Eliza watched him, not with anger, not with hurt, but with clarity. Some realizations come slowly. Others arrive all at once. And hers had already come. You said enough. She replied quietly. Caleb shifted slightly. I made a mistake. His voice carried something new now. Not sincerity, but intention. I didn't understand what I was walking away from. Eliza's gaze did not change. No flicker, no pull, because she understood now. He was not speaking of her. Not truly. He had heard things. The land, the ranch, the quiet power that came with it. His return was not about loss. It was about opportunity. You didn't walk away from anything. She said softly. You chose not to see it. The truth settled between them. Clear, unavoidable. Caleb exhaled, his patience thinning beneath the calm he tried to maintain. Things could be different. He said, you don't have to stay here. The words reached toward her, but they found no place to land. She turned slightly, her gaze moving toward the open fields, toward the life she had come to know. I'm not here because I have to be. Her voice was steady. I'm here because I chose to be. Caleb's expression shifted, just enough to reveal what lay beneath. Frustration, confusion, perhaps even disbelief. He had expected hesitation, uncertainty, but he did not find it. You're making a mistake, he said, and for the first time, there was something sharper in his tone. Eliza looked at him again, and this time, there was no softness left for him. No doubt, no question. No, she said gently. I already made that mistake once. The words were not cruel, but they were final. Caleb stood there for a moment longer, as if waiting for something to change. But nothing did, and eventually, he turned, just as he had before. But this time, the leaving felt different, because it no longer took anything with it. The air stilled again. The land exhaled, and Eliza remained, unshaken. She stood there for a moment, not reflecting, not wondering, just certain. Across the field, Jonah had seen it all. Not every word, but enough. He did not approach immediately, did not interrupt, because he understood something. Some choices must be made without witness, without influence. So he waited, as he always had. When Eliza finally turned, their eyes met across the distance, and something unspoken passed between them. Not a question, not an answer, just understanding. She walked toward him slowly, each step carrying something new. Not hesitation, but clarity. Jonah remained where he was, still, grounded. When she reached him, she did not speak right away. She simply stood there, the space between them no longer uncertain, just quiet. I thought I would feel something, she said finally, her voice soft. Looking back at him, Jonah did not respond immediately. And then, I don't. The words carried no confusion, only realization. He nodded once, as if that made sense, because it did. Eliza took a small breath, the kind that settles deeper than the lungs. I stayed, she continued, not because I didn't have somewhere else to go, but because she paused, not searching, just allowing the truth to arrive. Because this feels like where I'm meant to be. The words rested between them. Gentle, certain. Jonah looked at her, not with surprise, not with triumph, but with the same steady presence he had always given. You don't have to explain it, he said quietly. She shook her head slightly. I'm not explaining it. I'm choosing it. And in that moment, something shifted fully into place. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. The wind moved softly across the land, the sky stretching wide above them. And for the first time, Eliza stepped closer, not out of need, not out of fear, but out of something she had built within herself. Something strong, something sure. Jonah did not move toward her, did not close the distance, because he never had. He had always allowed her to come as far as she wished. And now, she stood beside him, not near, not almost, but beside, the kind of closeness that does not need to be claimed, because it has already been chosen. Days passed, then weeks, and the land continued to breathe around them. The garden flourished fully, colors spilling into places that had once been bare. Laughter found its way into quiet moments. Tommy's voice carrying across the fields. Mrs. Adler's knowing glances softening into warmth. And the barn, once a place of temporary rest, became something else entirely. Not because it changed, but because she did. Seasons shifted slowly, as they always do, without asking, without waiting. And one evening, as the sun dipped low, casting gold across the endless horizon, Eliza stood at the edge of the field, watching, the same way she had when she first arrived. But everything felt different now. Not the land, not the sky, just her. Jonah stood a few steps behind, not approaching, not needing to, because some distances no longer exist. She turned slightly, her gaze finding his. There was no need for words, no need for promises, because what they had built had never depended on them. It had grown in silence, in patience, in the quiet understanding that love, real love, does not arrive loudly. It does not demand to be seen. It stays. It remains. It chooses you, as you choose it. Eliza looked back toward the horizon, the sun now fading into something softer. And she understood, not everything that breaks you is meant to end you. Some things break you open, so that something better, something real, can finally take root. And maybe, just maybe, the right person does not come to rescue you. They come to sit beside you, until you remember how to stand on your own. And when you do, they're still there, not holding you up, but walking with you, side by side, under the same endless sky. If this story found a quiet place in your heart, take a moment and tell me, where are you watching from tonight? And if you believe that love can be gentle, that healing can be slow, and that the right people will never make you feel like you have to earn your place, then don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There are more stories waiting for you.